I'm going to change a little bit what I was going to say. I think you're right, it's incredibly hard to build an organization. The starting point that I want to make is sometimes it's even harder to reform one. And this is what I think is a distinction between American politics, and I said yesterday that the Democratic Party isn't really a party in the way that Europeans or Australians would understand a political party. It's a constellation or a congregation of campaign committees. And so there's a sort of famous story about an American traveler who arrives in the outskirts of Ireland, and he goes to a local Irish farmer and he asks him, how do I get to Dublin? And the guy says, well, if I was going to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. And sometimes when I think about, like this question of how do you rebuild a progressive movement, you look at the British Labour Party, you look at some of the issues that I've learned about the Australian Labour Party, and you say, like, how do you want to build an inclusive, inspired, respectful movement? And the answer is, I wouldn't start from where we are right now. And I don't mean to offend anyone in the Australian Labour Party by saying that. But I remember in 1997, which was my first experience with campaigning, and I thought the thing that struck me the most was your talk about the elevator speech. And that was the thing that struck me the most when I first visited the Obama campaign. And people were actually encouraged to talk about why they were part of this campaign. In 1997, what we had was a massive training process that was based around voter identification and sanitizing our movement, which was, here are a series of questions, they're part of a flow chart. Depending on your answer to question 1, you go to question 2, 3, or 4, depending on your question, so that we could essentially sort of slice and dice the electorate while we were canvassing. But the one thing that we stressed over and over again in everything that we did in the training session was, whatever you do, please don't bloody talk to them about what you think about the Labour Party or the particular issues they care about. Leave that to us. Because we know we will then contact them with tailored mails, direct mails, and it wasn't online. And I think that is why do we have to rebuild our movement? Probably we have to rebuild it because we disrespected most of the people who wanted to be part of it, and we alienated them. And so, Jenny, you were talking about culture. It's not about changing the regulation, it's about changing the culture. And I think that's what you guys got. The two's element of respect and empowering people is really, really important.
Mitch, sorry, Matt, the mic's really dependent on speaking.
Is it? Okay, sorry.
Can't talk to Mitch.
Okay, so we'll talk about it later, buddy. But I think that's a culture, respecting people. Because we've disrespected a lot of people who wanted to be part of what we do. So I think that's what I take, as much as of the organizational elements. Because it is harder to reform an organization. I spoke yesterday about the analogy of Blue State Digital coming in to see Gordon Browne and explaining how we could reach out to supporters. And the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, was inspired by the idea of online organizing and campaigning, linking a database to the Labour Party website and engaging in this way. And what the Secretary General told him was that we have to change our party constitution to do that. And I think this is the problem that we're facing as a parliamentary party. The Americans are facing an inverse problem, which is how do you institutionalize organizing, Obama for America and organizing for America to make it supportive of the Democratic Party and the legislative process. And we're facing a different problem about how we get a sense of insurgency. We're kind of sclerotic, incumbent, resistant to change, and there are lots of people with vested interests who don't want to let go of that. And until we get hold of that issue, until we really, I think it's, Tom McMahon will talk about the 50-state strategy and some of the other elements that he's doing, but one of the reasons why the Democrats were so successful is because they had some pretty bad defeats. And so they realized they had to start from scratch and renew. And I wonder whether, I think that's where we are in the British Labour Party right now. We had the worst election result in many years, and so we're going back to the drawing board. We're organizing Movement for Change, which is about creating community organizers. We're restructuring the way in which the party is organized, within which policy is developed, and ways in which we engage with others. But sometimes that has to come because of a really bad defeat. Now, you may be here, that may be where you're at in New South Wales, this may be the opportunity. But sometimes you really have to hit the low to move back towards the high. And I think the other element that you didn't really talk about, Mitch, but that is inspiring, and that this campaign was an insurgent campaign within the party. When Obama started his campaign, most people thought it was a positioning campaign so that after Hillary had become president and then not being president, he would have been the heir apparent to the process. And so if you look at how people are trying to learn from this around the world, I think that the idea of a primary is something that has become it's become a kind of a fetish. In France, in Germany, in the UK, we've had leadership elections or primaries. They're going to have them in Spain. But they're far more sanitized. How you become a candidate in Europe, who can become candidates, the kind of people that we attract to be part of our movement, it's a very sanitized process. I don't think we have answers about how we deal with that, but I think that one of the inspiring things that we're trying to do is we need to allow people to engage in the way they want, and we need different entry points into the party. James said yesterday when he was talking about movement for change that hopefully what that would do is help us identify people in the UK who weren't Oxbridge-educated professional spin doctors, policy advocates, to become the people who are our candidates locally. My hope is that it actually does a little bit more than this, and Mitch, I think it'd be great if you could explain your views on how Organizing for America is moving in this space, is that people also want to know how to become change makers in their local community. So this is not just about how they can organize and how they can become part of a voter activation network, a Get Out the Vote campaign. It's also, people would come to the Labour Party, and there's a wonderful story that Tony Blair would say that for his first experience in the Labour Party, he turned up in the 1970s, and people were writing letters to the Prime Minister about renationalizing the coal industry. And that if you didn't want to get engaged in this heavy debate about renationalizing the coal industry, there was nothing for you to do at a local party meeting. But actually, some people came and they wanted to know what it was like to be a good school governor. If I support the Labour Party and I want to be a school governor, what are the kind of issues that I should be pushing in my school? Or if I sit on a hospital board, what are the kind of issues I should be pushing? So I think when we think about rebuilding the movement and building the link between the party and the movement, we also have to think about, what is it that people want from us? And provide them those training opportunities. Because it's true that at our best, the movement is about a process of political education, and that's a two-way education process. That's about hearing and learning about people's needs and requirements. It's also about empowering them not just to be important within the party, but to be change makers themselves. And I think if we can do those two things, if we can actually respect people, listen to them, allow them to engage in ways that they want to engage, but at the same time, not just empower them within the movement, but empower them outside of the movement in their real lives to make a difference, then I think that's how we'll get to a situation of success, and that's how we'll build a progressive Australia or a progressive UK or a progressive America. And so I'd be very interested, Mitch, to hear your experiences on how you're transforming that over time.
I'll talk for 2 seconds, given that I talked for an hour earlier. And it's this: we had a little over 25,000 people indicate to us that they wanted to run for local office, and that's both elected, or municipal. We have a number of our team leaders who are school board presidents now, or members of the school board, are members of the state house or state senate, but also it's party. They ran for and became a precinct committee person, or a county chair, or in some instances state chair. So that, you're right, part of what we want to try to do is foster an environment where the skills and frankly the values they learn with us, if it is transferable and if they want to do that, we provide them the resources to continue doing that, both in their personal life and also their professional life. So we try to be as encouraging as possible. Now the one trick is that if it is a primary, we still kind of have to, back away and say, listen, OFA doesn't endorse or not endorse a local candidate. But oftentimes, this organization is now theirs. If you're a neighborhood team leader, and so this person's my, sort of quote-unquote boss, I'm ultimately probably more responsible or responsive to that person than to me as the national director. And if you want to go out and start knocking on doors for a local school board member or for yourself if you're running, oftentimes they do that. And it's created some uncomfortable moments for us. But it's ultimately something that we try to lift up and celebrate because it just continues their engagement and investment in the process.
Do you want to continue on?
No, I mean, I wanted to end by saying essentially, I think this is why David Cameron has been successful with his concept of the big society, is that the Labour Party in the UK, and I think social democratic and progressive movements, have become institutional groupings that do things to people, not with them. And part of our history is about a trade union movement. It is about mutualities and cooperatives. And so we were in society, but we become statist. And a movement is about working with society and being respectful and empowering individuals in that society. And so that's what I think it's about. Like this, the respect, inspire, empower thing is crucial to this. And if that becomes the motto of how we try and rebuild progressive movements around the globe, using new technology, new organizing techniques, data-driven, I agree with all of that. But I think that respect, inspire, and empower element is the key to it.